So thank you, Monica, for having me. First of all, just want to thank you for inviting me into this space, because I know this is, you've created this space. I know it's something that, is your baby, something that you have a vision for, that you work through. Every episode is intentional about what you put out there, the content you put out, and for you to invite me into this space, I really appreciate it. And I hope that I can honor what you've intended for the space to be by being a guest here. So I appreciate it. But yeah, I am Shanell Hagood. I work for a nonprofit that, Monica consults with. I am a mother of two. I have an 11-month-old daughter, like I mentioned, and then I also have a 2.5-year-old son. So I had, two children in 2 years. I had my son in 21, and I have my daughter in 23. And so, yeah, I probably look a little tired, because I am. I'm always tired. And yeah, so I, definitely have a lot of experience, just recent experience of stepping into motherhood and learning my own mother wounds. So excited to dive into that conversation. And then, yeah, the experience accomplishments. I don't know. I think it's accomplishments every day when I wake up and be a mother. So
yes,
I'm gonna just go there.
Yeah.
Every day I wake up and I'm able to care for myself as a woman and also be a mother is an accomplishment. So I'm gonna hang my hat on that for now.
Okay. So do you want me to just say that Shanell is an author? Shanell is a leader in DEI spaces. Mm-hmm. Yes. Motherhood. Absolutely. Probably, one of the jobs in our lives that requires the most and that we don't get as much praise for. So yes, I absolutely accept that answer, but I just want the audience to also know that this is a multi-dynamic woman that you have on this episode.
Thank you.
I'm always just impressed. Yeah. So the first time, funny story, I was trying to, I don't know if I was looking up your LinkedIn. I don't know what I was trying to do, but I Googled Shanell. I encourage you all who are listening to Google Shanell Hagood, okay? And then
please don't.
She don't even gotta speak for herself because Google will just do it for her. So I encourage you all to check her out because she really is a phenomenal woman. So let's get into this. I mentioned that this is one of the more challenging wounds that I've had to navigate. I've intentionally worked through this particular wound for the last 5 years, including some EMDR trauma therapy. I have done talk therapy. I have done a lot of repair with my own children because one of the things that I recognized and came up as I was doing this work to heal my mother wound is the damage that I also caused to my children as a mother and things that were passed down just because I was unaware. I really did not know or understand anything about mother wounds until about 6 years ago when my father passed, is when I started going to therapy and that there was this wounding. And so I have genuinely gone through every stage, I would say, of the grieving process to get myself through to a place where I at least feel less triggered by this mother wound, where I feel like things are more neutralized, where I feel like I'm at peace with it, where I feel like I can forgive. Because one of the things early on in this journey that I could not reconcile, learning that I had a mother wound, and Shanell, you can speak to this maybe too, is that in my mind, I thought in order for me to heal this wound, my mother was going to have to come on this journey with me. Like in my mind, I thought the only way that I was going to be able to heal was to get an apology. Like I needed an apology. I needed validation that my experiences had actually occurred. And I was not able to get those things. So the journey then becomes, do you stay stuck in the wound or do you figure out how to get yourself through it without these perceptions of things that you need for this other person to do to make that happen? So it has been quite a journey for me. I have gone through every emotion. I'm so thankful to be in a place now where I do feel much more at peace with this experience and this wound. So my hope is that in our conversation, we can help other listeners learn how to maybe get to a place where you also are not so triggered by your mother wound experience. My first thing that I want to do, the first question I had was, Shanell, when did you determine that you had this wounding in this way? And I looked up a definition of mother wound, and I really just did this off of Google. There is not any diagnosis for mother wounds. So it is not something that is in the literature as a diagnosis, but there is a lot of research, a lot of data, a lot of journals that you can go read about mother and father wounds. So I'm just using a definition that you could truly just get off of Google. So the mother wound is not a clinical diagnosis. Still, it refers to a type of attachment trauma that instills deeply rooted beliefs that make the child feel unloved, abandoned, unworthy of care, and numb to their feelings. The mother wound can arise from a variety of circumstances, including neglect, abuse, abandonment, or enmeshment. In some cases, the mother may have had her own unresolved emotional wounds or trauma that prevented her from providing the support and nurturing that her child needed. The mother wound can manifest as attachment issues, as codependent patterns, as depression, anxiety, disordered eating, and substance misuse. So that is the definition that I am working from. Again, just pulled that off of Google. But I think it encompasses a lot of at least what I've experienced with this wound. Yeah. So that's the definition we're going to go with. So Shanell, you tell me, when in your journey did you start to feel like there might be some wounding?
Yeah. It's such a relevant conversation right now for me because I know Monica mentioned I am on my healing journey. I'm in therapy once a week. I think this is the timing of this is just, I was definitely a child when I discovered that I was wounded, in this way. And a big part of it is that, she was a drug addict. So she didn't raise me or any of my younger siblings that she had. And I was raised by my great grandmother. So initially I had that feeling of like, okay, I'm not with my mother, but I saw my mother on a regular basis. You know what I mean? I saw her in the neighborhood that we lived in, and she would come over to the house, but I wasn't physically with her. But I think, I noticed I had a wound, I think, at a young age when I had cousins and, friends who had close friendships with their mother, right? Like I would go to a birthday party and their mother would be there throwing the party, talking about them and celebrating them. And I had a cousin I was close to. She had a really close relationship with her mother. She looked just like her mother, like they had all these things in common. And I think at a young age, I recognized that I didn't have that, right? Like I didn't have that. Me not being able to be physically with my mother already took that away, like of me being able to have a relationship with my mother in that way where we had a synergy, where we had a close relationship. So yeah, it led to feelings of, feeling unloved and abandoned, unworthy of care, because if the person that quite literally physically brought you into this world wasn't there with you, on a day-to-day basis, that felt. I tell my mom, I tell people that, my mom was my first love and my first heartbreak, right? Like it's the only person I knew, right? Of like, this is the person that I was with, and then I was born and then I wasn't with her. And it was these feelings. So that's at a very young age, I noticed the mother wound for sure.
How would you say, Shanell, that the wound manifests in your life?
Yeah. When I was younger, for sure, I had a lot of anger. I think that's the biggest way it probably manifested of just I would find things to be angry about, and I wanted to be angry. And I would, that would manifest in me being angry at the people who were around me, me being a little, unapproachable, about certain things. So that was my childhood.
Were you angry with your mom? Like, was the anger ever directed at your mom?
Yeah, it was directed at her too. Yeah.
Okay.
When it could be. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then I think, as I got older, as a teenager age, a little bit older, I think I had a strong attraction to being in proximity to older women who were nurturing, right? So I had a very close relationship with a teacher, like one of my high school teachers from ninth grade to 12th grade. I mean, she helped me with college. She helped me. She would give me extra money, like, to do things around her house. She would bring me lunch to school, So I had it felt like I had this vulnerability of like, if, really wanting some type like relationship with an older woman that felt nurturing and caring. And I had sought that in a teacher at school, and also at church. I was pretty active in church too. So I had like a woman I considered a mentor there that kind of helped me through. So I think that's how it manifested later, of like turning into, this wanting of having questions about, being a woman and those types of things that came up that, I was raised with my great grandmother. Back at the end of the day, when she started raising me, she was already 60 plus, right? So, there was a big generation gap there between us, and there were some things I could talk to my grandmother about, but there were other things that the connection just wasn't there in some things. So there was like a gap missing there for me, and I think I found that and mentors and stuff when I became a teenager. And then it's definitely evolved now because I'm a mother now. As of the last 3 years, I've become a mother. So I think the biggest way has been my responses to like wanting to do things completely different, right? Then so I'm always with my kids. Like, I mean, I just told you my kid was in the background. I'm always with my kids. And it goes into why I work the job I do, because it's a work from home job and it's flexible and it allows me to spend more time with my kids. It goes into like every decision that I make to not have to sacrifice that part, because I didn't have, my mother in the day to day. And I feel like that was a big part of my experience and a lot of things that I went through emotionally. So I wanted to take that away immediately from my kids' experience. So, and it shows up in different ways of just me trying to understand them, me trying to understand what they like and they don't like anticipating things, caring for them, nurturing them, and being patient, understanding them and where they're coming from. Even at this young age, like we talk to our kids about everything all the time. I mean, my son is only 2.5, but he has a verbose, emotional vocabulary because we talk about a lot of stuff. So a lot of that is definitely a response from my over involvement, is definitely a response from my feelings of abandonment by my mother, for sure.
Thank you. I have so many thoughts, starting with the expression of anger. And I want to touch on that because I think for me, my journey also started with the emotion of anger, but that came much later in life. And so one of the things I do know about parental wounds is that when we are in our developmental stages and we are attaching to our parental figures or our caretakers, whoever is responsible for our survival, if that person is not a functioning person, or if they are operating from their own wounds, unhealed wounds, not aware, what happens is, even though their parenting may be dysfunctional, in order for us to attach to that person, and the attachment is vital for our survival, right? Like at 3 and 4 and 5 years old, 6, 7, 8, even, if I wander off from this human, it is likely that I am not going to survive. Like, this is the person who is providing me shelter, food, even if in most cases, they may be dysfunctional, but they are providing something for my survival. So what happens in those situations is, in order for me to stay attached, I have to tell myself that this person is good and right, and that there's something wrong with me. Like, there must be something wrong with me, because my brain, in order to stay attached to the person, is not going to reconcile that it's them. the brain just does what it does. Like the brain just is like, you got to stay attached to the person. You know what I mean? Because you need them in some kind of way. So we're just going to say that whatever they're, projecting onto you, it must be your fault. As a child developing and going through attachment, that is typically how this happens. The way that this manifested for me in my life is I really did not discover that I had this wound until I was like 40 years old. So I had spent my whole life kind of feeling like something was off. I've never really, I feel like our mothers are the relationships that we know the longest, right? Like these are the humans that we know the longest, but I feel like I didn't have a lot of information about my mother. Like I didn't know a lot about her story, about her background, even though I've known her longer than any other human, I mean, even including my father, if you will. I was in this lady's body, you know what I mean? So I had this really intimate relation, but I really had a very limited understanding of who she was as a woman, and still to this day don't know a lot about who she was as a woman. With that, I spent a lot of my life believing that, what my mother said was the Bible, that it was true, that even if it was unfavorable about me, I had to believe it in order to maintain the relationship that I had with her. So up until 40, I had no understanding or idea that my mother maybe was parenting me from a place of being wounded. I didn't understand that. So as soon as I came to understand that, Shanell, I was so mad. I was so mad and so angry. I felt bamboozled. I felt like I had been manipulated. I just felt anger. And I wanted to touch on that because I want to say that I feel like anger, especially for women, is not the most acceptable emotion to have. It also is not really a support emotion to have about our mothers. So oftentimes, as I was experiencing these feelings, what I would get is, well, you only get one mother, like you better figure that out. You know what I mean? And it's not even about like my mother should figure something out. It is back to me. Like the finger is pointed back to me. Like, so you better figure that out because you only get one mother. So I would always say to people, as I was going through that experience of anger, I only get one me. Like I only get one me. So I don't know what we gonna do. So, and the other thing I want to add about anger is it is just like any other emotion. It is sadness, frustration, confusion, embarrassment. They're all just emotions, and our emotions are really the guides to where we need healing. So being angry with your mother is okay. Like, I just want to normalize that experience. Like, it's okay to be angry because the anger is what is going to trigger the cat to figure out, why am I angry? Like, that's where my journey started, right? Like, I wanted to go to therapy because I don't like to be angry. That's not my, my normal, place of being. So I don't like to feel angry. So I was curious and wanted to go figure out, like, why am I having this feeling? Like, what is going on? And that is what led me on this journey. So I'm just saying that to say, if you are angry, let yourself feel that. Like, let yourself go through that emotion. I would challenge you to not stay stuck in the anger and start becoming curious about why you're angry, because that is going to be what takes you on the journey to get to a place where you're not angry anymore.
Yeah, definitely affirm that. Even being like really angry as a child and even as an adult person. And so my road rage was severe, like in my 20s. Lord, it was severe. And I didn't know why I was so, I'm still figuring it out. Like that's part of the reason why I started therapy, because I didn't want to have those messy expressions of anger in front of my kids. I didn't want to model that as a way of like, I'm always on edge. You know what I mean? Like, it's like you said, it's good to express anger. But it's also good to unpack why you have these big old messy, reactions to anger, in the ways that you express anger. And in my mind, it's like, how am I teaching my kids of how to deal with their emotions if I'm just, somebody cut me off and I'm, ripping off in front of them. And, so I think, when I became a mother, that was the first time I became curious about why I was angry. Before I was like, is something wrong with everybody else but me. It was like everybody else is the problem. If people just learn how to drive, then I wouldn't be so angry. You know what I mean?
And that what you just said goes beyond driving.
Oh yeah.
That mind frame becomes a pattern that we get stuck in with our relationships, because now it becomes like all the men are just bad. If the men could go figure it out, then I could be happy. Like that pattern of thinking of like it is everybody else and it has nothing to do with me is also a pattern that will keep you stuck.
100%, 100%. And what's surprising me so much in unpacking my anger in therapy is how layered it is, right? Like we go through questions and questions of layers and layers of, and then it's a root, you know what I mean? Like you get to the root of like, well, you didn't feel heard, you didn't feel seen, you did, like, and then you're like, so where in your life can you pinpoint when you didn't? And I'm just like, like we can talk for years about how I haven't felt heard or seen and the people who've wrong, you know what I mean? And how that manifests in everyday life, and it's like you said, it's beyond somebody cutting you off. It's, you can just pull it out in different pockets, you know what I mean? So that's the part that has been so surprising to me and revealing to me. So I think the bit about being curious about your anger, when you come to a place where you're curious about your anger, I think that's when you can learn a lot about it.
Yeah. Yes. A couple other things that you touched on that I just wanted to highlight. That moment, whether it is in your childhood, teenage years, for me, it happened probably around like 6th grade, where I remember saying to myself, when I become a mother, I am not going to be like her. Like, I didn't even know what that meant. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really know exactly what, I just knew that there was a feeling, something, I was aware enough to know that there was something not right in our connection. You know what it was, Shanell? I remember I wanted to wear a bra. I was like in 6th grade. I wanted to wear a bra. I didn't even really have like anything to put in a bra. I still don't really have anything to put in a bra, but I wanted to wear a bra. My friends were getting us, and like I wanted to wear a bra.
Yeah.
I was not comfortable to ask my mother to take me bra shopping. So every night I would pray that in the morning when she woke me up for school, that she would just ask me. And I was old enough to at least discern that that was not, and maybe it was because like you, I had friends who had a different kind of relationship with their mother. I don't really know, but I was old enough to know that like, why can't I just ask my mother to take me bra? Like that seems odd to me. So I hadn't, that thought of like, well, when I become a mother, we're going to talk about everything. Like, it's not going to be anxiety. Like girl. And then I became a mother and just everything. I repeated. We could talk about everything. Here's the problem with that proclamation. When you say, I am going to be a different parent than the parent you had, you also have to go get some tools and training to become that. Like you don't just a better version of your parent through osmosis or through wishful thinking. Like you literally have to go get some tools and some, training and some healing so that you can become this different, you could do it better or different. And I didn't understand that. So, and the mother wound, I would say, is one that is really complicated because there's a lot of suppression in that wound. There's a lot of like, I don't want to, you bury a lot of it like that because that's how you have to get through it. This is not it's a very different situation. If I'm in a relationship with somebody and they're doing things that are crossing my boundaries or making me sad or making me frustrated or making me upset, as an adult, I can leave. Like I can leave that relationship. When you're a child, you don't have the autonomy to just walk away from your caretakers. So you're forced to try to figure out ways to stay, like I said, connected to these people. So you're making all kind of rationalizations, you're suppressing stuff, it's a lot of things that I don't even remember about my childhood because in order to get through it, I just had to like
block it out.
Yeah, like, move on. So That was one thing that you said that I wanted to really touch upon, is just this understanding that I think, you know, when we have these complicated relationships, we do get to a place where we're like, we're going to do it different. But I really encourage, in your feeling of I want to do it different, to also go get the support and the training and the help and the healing, so that you can actually actualize that thought, because it is possible to do it different. I just think that we don't realize that there's a lot of unlearning that has to come with that too.
Mm-hmm.
So my second question was, what work are you currently doing to heal your mother wound, and how is that work informing your current role as a new mother? So I know you talked a little bit about therapy. Kind of help, tell us what that journey has been like, and how is that changing your relationship with your children as a mother?
Yeah. So this is probably, so I was in therapy when I was in college, but hadn't really been since. And when I had my son, in my postpartum journey, a part of that was, mental health and getting a therapist. So, and that was just to work through trauma. I had a lot of trauma around my son's birth, in terms of the actual, birth plan and all that, and the surgery. So I had therapy postpartum, and then I again had another child like a year later. So ended up going back into therapy at the beginning this time. So I switched it. So before, like, I had my son, then I had therapy. This time when I got pregnant, I got a therapist immediately, and then carried on with that person. And a big part of that was I was just so mentally just kind of all over the place about the postpartum, being pregnant again, and then, and I just wanted to shore up something. So that was kind of the journey, the therapy of just doing it differently, I guess, of like finding a way to deal with trauma differently, or deal with things as you're going through them, instead of dealing with them after, you go through them. And then, yeah.
Did you feel, Shanell, like, was becoming pregnant in and of itself trigger for you?
It definitely was, because I miscarried before so I had my son in 21. I miscarried in 2020. And that was my first pregnancy. So, and then and then the year before I miscarried, I lost my mother. So I lost my mother, I miscarried in 2020, then got pregnant, had my son in 2021. So it was all just, and then it also the pandemic, 2020. So it was a lot of just things at one time. And that was probably the lowest point mentally after I miscarried. And then when I had my son, I had so much anxiety, because that was also like the peak of COVID. And then, my husband couldn't be there with me in the appointments. And I was being told all this information about, like, staying in the house and make sure like, I was so fearful about something going wrong, because of how fearful that time was around when I was pregnant. And it was also the residual trauma from already having something go wrong with a pregnancy. So I had this anxiety that I had to do every single thing right in order for me to have, in order for the pregnancy to be successful. So, it was also me not leaving the house when I was pregnant. And you know what I mean? And it was just so many things. I was so isolated, and I still didn't do therapy until postpartum. You know what I mean? Is a big, that was a big part of it. And so, and that was a response, right, to a mother wound, because it's like, for me to feel like my mother didn't do enough to make sure that she showed up for me, right? She couldn't show up for me. In my mind, I had to do everything I could to show up and make sure, So, you get like all the different, just the anxiety I had of like making sure that this was successful, that I didn't fail. Because to me, like, if you know anything about maternal health, miscarriages is so many different factors that go into a miscarriage. But it's almost impossible for you not, as a mother, not to blame yourself, because it's something that went wrong in your body. So you're like already internalizing that there's something wrong with you. There's something that
and a lot of the mother wound itself is saying that something is wrong with you already.
Right. So dealing with all of that going into pregnancy and then postpartum and doing therapy, my response to getting pregnant again was to do it differently, do it at the beginning, like work through your emotions as you're going through pregnancy. And, you know, and not just in therapy, it was also with the people around me. So being honest with my husband, you know, about how I was feeling, being honest with my friends, you know what I mean? And not feeling like I had to go through all of these emotions and things in isolation. So I just approached it all differently. And that was a big step in me healing, starting to, you know, address my mother wounds, you know, me reaching out for help, you know, me giving touch points, me, you know, intentionally doing things to not mentally be in the place that I was, where I was with my son. That was a big part of it. And then afterwards, you know, I had a son first, and then I had a daughter. So I think the other part was this, I'm raising a little Black girl, you know what I mean? Which I prayed for that, you know, and that's what I wanted. But then at the same time, it's like, she's not you, you know what I mean? So there's so much that I deal with in therapy that deals with my childhood and what I went through and all these things and expectations that I had of the people around me. And that just because that's how I wanted to be mothered doesn't mean that that's how my daughter needs to be mothered, right? Like, and so allowing my daughter to be her own person and responding to how she needs to be mothered versus imposing, you know, my will on how she needs to be mothered, which is an everyday battle, okay? Because I look at that little girl and I see my mother. You know, I look into her eyes and I see my mother, and I look at her and I see myself. I see myself in her, right? So it's like, it's difficult. Like every day I'm just like, okay, you know, she's only 11 months, but I know it's going to be an ongoing thing of like learning who she is and mothering her in that way. So those are some of the things. I'm in therapy. I'm talking to people, you know, I'm having conversations, and I'm just trying to learn and allow my daughter to be, you know, who she is.
You touching on some of my favorite mother wound topics, because that experience of parenting your child for who they are, as opposed to parenting them from the perspective of what you didn't get, because that thought in your mind of I'm going to do it different already is setting you up for failure, because it's already setting you up to parent the child based on what you felt was lacking. So now, I was thinking about this the other day. I have birthed 2 children, raised 2 children through to adulthood. I had a funny conversation with my oldest the other day. I have this Instagram account. Most of you probably come to the podcast from my Instagram account, but the Instagram space is a beautiful community of healing and people who are working on healing and doing healing work. So we don't really get a lot of weird comments or like, it's just not that kind of a space. Like it just doesn't breathe that kind of energy. But for whatever reason, this week in particular, I'm getting just a lot of weird comments, a lot of projecting. And it makes sense to me because there is so much going on in the world right now, and people are suffering. And when people are suffering, they project. I don't think it doesn't trigger me, but I have to stay vigilant of it because I try to get it off the page so that other people aren't triggered by some of these comments. So anyway, there was a girl who made a comment that was unfavorable, and I was telling my child about it, my oldest child. And she was like, what's her handle? I'm going to handle this. And my oldest child is my peacemaker child. Like, she is the child who is reserved, did not like, conflict. So I'm hearing her say this, and I don't want to go vilify this person. Like, because I'm in a different, state of mind in my life right now. Like, I'm very much like looking for peace. So I don't want to, I know that the girl is projecting. I'm not offended. I'm not triggered. I could care less. I'm a blocker, deleter. It'll be fine. My child wants to go on a hunt and find the girl and tell her what it really is. What is so funny to me about this whole exchange, Shanell, is that growing up was who my child is being right now. Like, my child is a mother now, right? No, right. I'm not. So this child would come home to me and tell me, Sally or somebody got in her face, and I'm like, we about to go, where's Sally, where's her mama, like we about to go. And my oldest would be like, Mom, please don't go up there. I don't want no problems. And it wouldn't matter. Like what she said wouldn't matter. I was still gonna go up there and try to tear everybody's head off. She would be so frustrated because that's not how she wanted me to resolve that situation in that moment. And I think she really had an understanding that when I would swoop in and behave that way, it would really make her life harder. So I couldn't hear that for whatever reason when she was, going through her middle school and into early high school years. I could not validate what she was asking me to do for her. And then my second daughter is much more of a fighter. So she would want me to respond in that way. So I had two girls, but two girls who operate in the world very differently. Yeah. And it was challenging at times for me to step outside of what I wanted for myself as a child, what I needed for myself as a child, and really see them as individual humans who had their own way of navigating life. And I often did parent from the perspective of what I would have wanted and not necessarily what they were asking for. Yeah. Wound is a trip. Like it's a confidence wound. And what I will say is for me, I think what I have come to learn is that the mother wound, at least in my experience, is the root of so many other dysfunctions, right? So like, it's almost like for a lot of my life, I was trying to heal different parts of me without getting to a root. Like I knew that maybe something was wrong with the mother relationship, but I needed to be in denial about that. So I didn't want to deal with that. So instead I would just try to heal around it. So say, for example, I always try to relate emotional healing to physical healing. So say, you notice that your vision is starting to get blurry. You go get LASIK. While that's happening, you notice that your skin is starting to get dry and you're having dry patches. And so you spend money on all these expensive lotions. Then you start, you're getting a tingling in your toes and your leg and your limbs. Finally, you go to a doctor and learn that you are pre-diabetic. Like you have the root is diabetes, right? You spent all this money on trying to fix all these other things, but the root was the diabetes. Like you have to get to the root. So what I've always felt like this mother wound was creating so much dysfunction in my dating life, in my work life, in my self-worth was so with this wound. I had very high self-esteem, but I had very low self-worth. And if anybody who has been following me for a while, I talk distinctly about the difference between the two. Self-worth being the understanding that you don't have to produce or do anything, that you are a child of God, and so you should just have a good life. Self-esteem is based on things you do well and get validated for. So they're two different things. Because I had such high self-esteem, I could cosplay my self-worth. And I was good. Like I had myself believing that I was very confident. But the choices I made in my life would say the opposite. The people I would choose to connect with, the people I chose to, have children with, like the choices I made in more intimate spaces in my life, even where I chose to work, were all to me led and dictated by that unhealed wound. Yeah. So I don't know how you was living before you realized that you had a mother wound, but baby, I was out there. I'm curious, Shanell, what was your relationship like? You mentioned that you lost your mom around the time that you lost your first child. What was your relationship like with your mom before she passed away? Did you feel like you were able to reconcile anything are there questions that you still have that you weren't able to get answers to? Like, I'm just curious about what was the state of your relationship with your mom before she passed away?
Yeah. And I think, this kind of goes in, Monica, the other question of, not the question, but just comment of like how I was living. I think that's a layered question for me of how I was living before I realized I had a mother wound and started working through it, because I guess I just realized different phases of it at different parts of my life. You know what I mean? Like at a young age, I recognized the abandonment feelings. And, as I got older, I recognized the, not feeling nurtured and, yearning for that. And then as I got more into like being a young adult, it was like wanting to feel love, desperate to feel love, like desperate to feel companionship. You know what I mean? And so it just showed up at different times as I evolved as a woman, and it showed up differently, as I became a mother too, and speaking about that. So it's it was a little wild too at times for me to try to feel that, not really knowing how to feel that wound. You know what I mean? So it's just interesting to kind of hear you navigate that and knowing your journey of like being a mother and then, evolving with your children, now being of adult age and you still dealing, you know what I mean? It's just the journeys evolve so much. So I just thought that was a very interesting point. And so with that, evolving to my mother passing away and not physically being here, that was a whole nother, mother wound that I didn't realize I had, of like, I didn't realize what my mother did feel for me. All I did was recognize what she didn't when she was here. Right. So all I knew was I felt abandoned. I didn't feel loved. I didn't feel seen. I didn't feel nurtured. You left this gap, this hole, like of this yearning of wanting to be loved. And it was easy to recognize when she was here what she didn't do. But when she physically was not here anymore, I was able to identify what I was missing. You know what I mean? Which is access to my mother. At the end of the day, I had access to my mother, and that meant something to me. It meant something to me to be able to know my mother's story. It meant something to me to be able to connect the general cycle, you know what I mean, that happened in between my mother and me. And it meant something to me to laugh with my mom. It meant something for me to have her at my wedding, And now that I have children, it means something to me that she will never meet my children, Like that, those were things that I never knew was a wound, of like, my mother actually means something to me in a very, and she feels something for me. It may not be in the way that I felt like I always needed, but she did feel something for me. And so figuring that out was a really interesting journey, and I'm still figuring it out. But the thing I tell people about my relationship with my mother is that by the time my mother was coming to pass away, me and my mom were best friends. I mean, we would talk. I didn't live, she was in Detroit when she passed away. I was living in Philadelphia at the time. But me and my mom would talk all the time. And my mom would be up. She was a night owl. So I would be up, not be able to sleep. I call her at 2:00 in the morning. We'll talk for 2 hours. You know what I mean? She'd tell me about her life. She'd recycle all these things. So, and I learned about her as a woman, which is something that I didn't know I needed, to understand her as a woman. So I think being able to understand her, being able to laugh and joke with her, that all meant a lot to me. And I still had a lot of questions still when she passed away. I still wanted her, to be healed and to be better, but I wasn't able to. So, so that's where we were by the time she passed away.
How did you get there, Shanell? Like, how did you and your mom get to a place where you were on the phone at 2 a.m. having conversations for 2 hours and laughing?
I did my own work. I think, Monica,
like at that time, was your mom still struggling with substance abuse?
Yes, she was. Yep.
Okay. So this was a lifelong.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
And I think the only way I can explain it is, Monica, I think you did a good job of it too, of you always wanting something from your mother and like an acknowledgement, an apology or something for you to move on. And I came to a place where it was just like, that's not, like, you are an adult and you have to deal with your stuff as an adult, regardless of what another adult decides to do. Right. So like coming to terms with that is so hard. Like, you know what I mean? Because it's kind of like, you don't know what this person did. Like, you don't know. But at the end of the day, like when you become an adult, you have to stop blaming everybody for your life not going the way that you want it to go. Or, you not being able to, like, it becomes old and childish. So then it becomes the finger points back at you, like, you did this, you're doing this to yourself. So stop doing it, And I think that is where the point I came to probably earlier in my 20s. I got married really young. I got married at 22. So, you know, when I was in a really serious committed relationship before getting married to my husband, we were together for 5 years. In that 5-year span, I had to deal with a lot of stuff emotionally that I was carrying into a relationship. Feelings of insecurity, feelings of not, you know, being loved, not worthy of love, all of those things I had to unpack with being in this like really serious relationship. And I think as I had to mature in that way, in a very emotional relationship, that helped me kind of deal with my own stuff. So it helped me to not be so angry. Like being able to come to a place where you're emotionally mature to be in a healthy relationship really can help set the tone for all the other relationships in your life. You know, because when you are able to overcome to a place of like, you're not being petty, you're not being like, you really are in a relationship and you both are emotionally committed to understanding one another, hearing one another, you know, loving each other through the pain and the difficult conversations, and understanding their trauma and them understanding yours. We're able to come to a place to do that. You can take those tools and do that and apply that to any relationship that you have. And your relationships can become better. And you can understand how to protect yourself or express yourself in relationships too. So I think I was able to deal with my stuff separately and allow my mother to be who she was, approach our relationship differently and say, like, every time I see my mother, I don't have to be so angry about X, Y, and Z because I don't expect that from her anymore. Here's what I expect from me in our relationship. So that's how we came to that place.
I appreciate you sharing that journey. I'm so grateful to hear that there was, at least for you, an opportunity to have that connection with your mother for, you know, she transitioned, and for you to make peace with it, like for yourself. Because I think that had that happened a different way, you know, like had you lost your mother and not gotten to a place where you were able to laugh and have experience some joy, like I don't know, I would imagine that it would make the healing of it a little more complicated. You said something about like once you become an adult, like it's your responsibility. I think it also changes things when you become a mother. Because for me, becoming and going through the journey of motherhood, especially from start to now my children are adults, when I got to a place of going to therapy and really that I too had contributed to for my children, that I too had caused harm, it unlocks compassion for my mother, right? It unlocks compassion for this woman who I don't really know her story, but was really doing the very best she could. You know what because I know I was doing the very best that I could. You know what I mean? Like, I know I had intent. Like, I was 9 years old when I said I'm going to be a better mother. Like, I had been planning for this. I was ready. Shoot. So for me to have the, you know, awareness that I'm going to do it different at 9 and then get the opportunity to do it and mess it all up, I'm like, well, gosh darn. Like, okay. So it helped me to understand that we are all just humans having an experience like this. I don't know your story. I don't know the journey, but what I do know, and that's going to kind of get us into our next question, but what I do know is my mother did the very best she could with what she had. And what I will say specific about Black and brown people is that there are so many layers of our trauma that inform how we engage with our children, generation after generation after generation. I come from you and I, before we got on to recording, we were talking about, you made the comment about me being light skinned, and we were talking a little bit about colorism.
Monica, I am so sorry. I did not know.
And I just want to say to listeners, we are going to do an episode on colorism because this is something that has been coming out. It's been coming up a lot lately. I'm saying this because even as I sit here before you as a fair-skinned Black woman. Without me even directly knowing my history, it is apparent to me that somebody probably got raped somewhere in this lineage. Like there was probably some assaults that happened in this lineage. There was, because you don't get to become a fair-skinned Black girl coming from the roots of Africa without, something happened. Really understand that I am coming from women who endured major atrocities, some major trauma, some major of their personhood, of their body. Like it helps me understand like why they might become guarded, why they might become selfish, why they might become like it helps me to understand, like, because you don't have a history like that without being wounded and scarred. And so instead, I think where I'm at now in my understanding of this is, instead of me blaming my mother, instead of me blaming, and being angry with her, the way this has now kind of transformed through my healing is being honored that my mother survived, that her mother survived, and that they created a space where I now can do the work to heal myself and maybe even change the trajectory for generations to come. Like, that's a privilege. Like, I am standing in the privilege of women who sacrificed a whole lot for me to be able to go to therapy and so rather than being upset and being mad, I'm thankful. I'm thankful that they survived. With that, I'm still boundaried. Like, I'm still
yes.
Because here's the thing, I can't heal myself if I still am battling you trying to keep me small. Even if you're trying to keep me small is rooted in some sort of, protection of, I don't know, I'm not going to be able to heal myself and get myself to a place where I can evolve and elevate if I'm still, being told that I'm not good enough or whatever these messages are that I received. I still have to have boundaries. So to me, when I started this journey, for everybody who's listening, I was angry. I was upset. There was a space and time where I did not speak to my mother. There was a Mother's Day where I was not speaking to my mother. And that was very difficult for me because prior to that, we were very celebratory of our mom for Mother's Day. Like, Mother's Day was where we wrote out huge chapter books to honor her on Facebook. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there was a lot of overcompensating, celebrating just because you wanted to get love from this person. I remember that first Mother's Day where I had been in therapy. I knew I had some wounds. I was upset with my mother. I had tried to have a conversation with my mother about the wounds. She was not capable of doing that work. I was frustrated some more. So I didn't want to celebrate her for Mother's Day. I didn't know what I was like. I had never even had that thought that I wasn't going to celebrate my mother. So that was a challenge. And I had a mentor who was in my life at that time, because I do feel like whatever you believe, God, the universe, I don't know, Yoda, like, brings people when you need them. So I had an older Black woman who said to me, you honor your mother because she birthed you. Like, without her, you wouldn't be here. But if your mother is being abusive, you don't have to celebrate her. And that was huge for me. Like, that was huge for me. And there was only one Mother's Day where I didn't celebrate her. And in lieu of celebrating her, I donated some money to another mother who was struggling, about to lose her place. That's how I reconciled it. But those were difficult times, And to your point, because my mother is not on the same place in the journey as I am, all of this healing that I've done has been without her. Like, I've arrived at this place and these new thoughts and these new feelings without ever really having a conversation about the things that I feel like happened in my childhood. And it sounds like that's what you're saying too.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
a lot of work is individual. I think a lot of people don't realize how individual, because at the end of the day, you have to be at peace, and that shouldn't be held. That power of you being at peace shouldn't be held in another person, in what they decide.
And you talked about isolation, and some of that, I think is self-inflicted. Like, we go into our own, cave to heal. But I also feel like there's an isolation again in this belief that I'm not supposed to question or be mad at my mom. So now, like, I felt isolated because everybody else was like kind of gaslighting what I was feeling and saying like, you need to just get over it because that's your mother. You know what I mean? So then there's also the double isolation of like, my community is shaming me because I am feeling upset about things that happen to me and these are people like some of my family understands how my mother can be, you know what I mean? But at the same time, they still are like, that's your mother. And I'm just
Right.
looking, but like, so
just acknowledge that this is crazy. Yep.
and then literally will be like, but that's your mom. Like, and I'm just like, what? So that was also a very isolating chapter of the journey was people just were like, no, you're not allowed to be mad at your mom. So I hope, like I said, to normalize that feeling because you can be mad. You just don't want to stay mad. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It is my belief, this is the third question, that even in having a mother wound, Shanell, there are still some ancestral gifts that have been passed down through at least my maternal lineage, I feel. Do you feel that way? Like, do you feel like even though your mom was not maybe readily present in your life, can you like determine any gifts, any, tools or, things that your mom passed down to you that aren't?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I mean, inherently, just me and my mother are survivors. You know what I mean? Just, different experience I know that we've both had, survived. And, my mother was the first in our family, my immediate family, to go to college. She didn't complete, but I was the first in my immediate family to complete college. So, I think the resiliency, the determination, the agents, that you have to be focused and do, and achieve beyond what is the resources around you. It's definitely something I picked up from my mother. My mother was a good time. A good time. I mean, funny, life of the party, and I like to think of myself as a good time too. So I love it. That's something that I know, she likes to joke and everything. So that was, that's something else. And then I think my mother had an ability to make you feel like you were special, even in the limited interaction with her. To make you feel like she remembered me, like we connected. Like I know that's, I know next time I see her, it's gonna be a vibe. You know what I mean? And what stands out to me is when people like, at the beginning of this, you said like, immediately, we met through this work thing, but we had this connection on us working together. I think about my mother a lot when people say that to me of like, oh yeah, that's like we a vibe, like we connected. And I think about my mother because that like she can meet somebody and just it's like they've known each other, you know what I mean, for years. So those are definitely some things I've noticed from her.
I love that. I love that your mom's spirit lives on through you. And so even though your kids may not get to experience her in the physical, they still get to experience her through you and all the, gifts that you're carrying that she left you with. So that's beautiful. I also feel like that my mom definitely modeled resiliency and survival for sure. And again, my grandmother's 104 and still living. So both of these women. The other thing about my mother, yeah, it is. It's amazing. My mom, as a child, like I thought that this woman, I just thought that she was the most beautiful. I'm trying to think of my mom's very Claire Huxtable in her how she presents to the world. So growing up, I mean, we all loved Claire, right? Like so growing up, I just thought she was just the most beautiful, stylish. And what I distinctly remember is I had this belief as a child that my mom could like anything my mom argued, she got. I remember we would, I would go shop. My mom is a shopper. I would go shopping with her as a little kid often, and she might have a return or I don't know, something where the policy said she wasn't going to be allowed to do that. And at the end, we would walk out with whatever it is that my mother wanted, because like, that's who she, and so there's like this dynamicness to her. She can read you down for sure, like, and not even curse. Like, you just be sitting there like, what? I don't need, like, put you in your place and read you down without even saying a curse word. My mom is able to the energy in a room. That has been said to me by multiple people. And whether that shift was in a positive or a negative way, like, she has the ability to shift the energy in the room. And I do believe that every one of those qualities that I just named, I acquired. Like,
Definitely, yeah.
I acquired. So I am so thankful. Like, I can see, like, sometimes I'll talk to people and they like, if they're very spiritual, they'll say like, well, when you were in heaven before you were born, you picked that mother. And I be thinking like, well, why would I pick, like, this
Monica,
hard? This was a hard job. Like, why did I pick? Why did I know? But like, I'm just curious, like, what would make me this? But
Lord.
I could see if I had to choose, different wounds, this pathway that I had to go, like, because the grit, the resilience, the will to survive, the ability to forge a way when there isn't a way. Like, these are all things that I needed to get me. I am also the first generation to graduate within my immediate family from college. Each one of my siblings that came after me has graduated from college. Like, there is this is some real, you know what I'm saying? Those were real skills. Like, regardless of the negative things or the things that I think went wrong, those are some real legitimate life skills that have carried me to today. So that's, I would say to listeners, yes, be angry, be whatever it is that you are. But the goal is to get yourself to a place in this journey where you can have empathy, compassion, understanding, and acceptance of the fact that your mother maybe did some things wrong, but she did some things right too. You know what I mean? And with that, getting yourself to a place of forgiveness, because at the end of the day, holding on to that anger, that animosity is just going to keep you stuck. It's going to keep you stuck in your own healing. You can only meet people as deeply as you meet yourself. So if you can't figure out a way to have compassion for your mother, it's going to be very difficult for you to muster up the compassion to accept yourself authentically, to show up authentically even. I wanted to make sure we touched on what we felt were some of the gifts that we got from our moms. And then my last question, which we are over time, which I knew we would be, because this is just that topic. How do you, Shanell, and I think this question is even more just impactful coming from you, given the complexity of the mother wound and the grieving that you are going through. So how do you approach Mother's Day? Like, what do you recommend to other women who may be kind of in your same situation, where they experience this kind of fractured relationship with their mother, but they also have lost their mother? And now here comes Sunday and it's Mother's Day.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was just talking about this with my therapist, like, about this very thing, how to approach Mother's Day. And Mother's Day is another thing that just has evolved for me. So, when I was younger, it wasn't something like everybody was making stuff for their mom. I was making stuff for my grandma, which I love. I love my grandmother. You know what I mean? But it was just a different experience. And, when I became an adult, the meaning of it just changed. I would send stuff for my grandma, but, I wouldn't really think too much of it. And now that I'm a mother and someone who's lost their mother, the first few were hard for me after I lost my mother. And I remember my first Mother's Day. I woke up to a bunch of text messages of people sending me happy Mother's Day. And I was so confused. I was like, why are people thinking about me and texting me Happy Mother's Day? So I think, one thing is that when those initial times, I chose to honor my mother. You know what I mean? I chose to, remember her, think about things that made me laugh. I have some videos in my phone of my mother that make me smile ear to ear. You know what I mean? And now that I've become a mother, I've been more intentional about making sure I'm poured into. So this Mother's Day in particular, because this is last year on Mother's Day, I was 9 months pregnant. So I was just chilling. I wasn't trying to do nothing. Could barely walk. This Mother's Day, my daughter, she'll be 1 at the end of the month. But I'm being intentional about saying, look, my grandma, everybody, I got their gifts handled. I just need time to myself to recharge and do what I want to do. So I'm intentionally choosing not to pour out a lot beyond what I'm comfortable with on Mother's Day, and to make sure that I'm good and filled up. And while also honoring the people in my life who raised me and mothered me.
That's so good, Shanell.
I told you, me and my therapist talked about it. So she helped me come up with that answer. I can't take all the credit for it. She helped me. We talked about it for a while. And so that's one thing that I'm doing this year that I haven't done. But this is my second Mother's Day officially as a mother. Like, I was pregnant the first time, so that's what I'm doing this time, and I'm excited about it. So
I'm excited for you too.
What about you, Monica? Come on now.
What am I doing for Mother's Day? Shanell, my greatest joy in this healing journey has been the ability to repair fractures with my own daughters, right? So I feel like, although this will be a never-ending journey, me and my children, my daughters, are in a very good place. So I'm saying that to say, if you don't know, I moved away from where I lived all my life 3 years ago. So I currently live in Dallas, but my children still live in Ohio, where I'm from. My oldest, for Mother's Day, gifted me a flight back home because my first daughter will be graduating so I will get to go home and see my grandbaby grad from preschool. But I love about that is just, I do feel like like for me, this is how I gauge the quality of my healing and our relationship, is by the time that my children want to spend with me, right? Like, that my children actually like and want me to be around, that my children call me, you know what I mean? And like want to talk to me and want to run things by me and want to laugh on the phone with me. Like, that to me is my indication of how well I'm doing on this healing journey, is just by the quality of my relationship that I have with my children. So I'm absolutely celebrating my mother. I will make sure that she is taken care of. I won't be at home this Sunday because I don't leave for a couple weeks. But I mean, honestly, I'm in a place in my life where I pour into me almost every day. Like, so I'm past the heavy lifting of parenting, right? And I talk to you often about how I don't even have a pet. I don't have a plant. Like, I don't like this. I'm in a season of like, we just nurturing Monica right now because I needed that. Yeah, like I needed that. Like, I also started my journey. You talked about getting married young. I had my first child when I was 19. So I was, raising children most of my life, like, for a good portion of my life. And so now that they are adults and thriving in their own ways and, prospering, I have this opportunity to like pour into me. So I do that every day is Mother's Day over here. Okay.
As it should be. Okay.
I'm living my best life. So yeah, I am. But I am excited to go home and get to see them and get to see my grandchildren. Yeah. So I want to thank you so much for coming on here and showing up authentically, right? And being vulnerable, because this is not an easy conversation to necessarily have. I done took 2 walks today. Like, I was like really trying to like, meditate and get myself prepared, so that I could have this conversation. So I know it's not an easy thing to talk about. I do want to say that I feel like this is a wound that took a lifetime to cure within me. And it's going to probably take that same amount of time for me to truly get healed from it. Like, I feel much better, right? Here's something as you were talking, you might've saw me on the phone because I was looking something up. So I did this whole post about the mother wound, right? And I'm so proud because I've been spent 5 years on this mother wound. So I'm like we got this. We got the mother wound on. I'm over here. I could coach other people on their mother wounds. Like, I'm ready. Okay. Girl, somebody left a comment and it said, if there's a mother wound, then there's probably also a father wound.
Or
Rosaland, I want to shout you out. Rose Leanne 20. Girl, you left that comment and I didn't even acknowledge the comment for like 4 days. Cause I was like, it's been 5 years. Like, I didn't even, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't even know I had these wounds. So it's been 5 years and now this, you know, so
always growing.
It's always gonna be something. It's always gonna. So I joked with my girlfriend the other day who did this healing in the opposite way that I did. She started with her father wound and is now navigating her mother wound, which is a beautiful thing for our connection. So I'm telling her, like, yeah, this girl said there's a father wound. So I'm starting to unpack. And I told her, I said, you know what? I don't even want to dive too deep into this. I'm going to have a hot girl summer and then we'll do the father wound in the fall. Like, I'll start out to that in the fall. Like, I'm going to have to dive into.
Right. So let me enjoy my summer and then we can talk about more trauma. But I just got over this. I'm just dealing with this.
5 years of healing. I'm like, no, I ain't about to do that. So the journey is what it is. Like, and you know, I'm so grateful for healing. I'm so grateful for awareness. I do feel like navigating the father wound will probably be less complex because I will have survived the real nitty gritty of the mother wound. So now at least I know what to expect. So it's not so, you know, laborious, but my father is no longer here. Like your mother is no longer here. So now that's going to be, you know, a different kind of journey. But yes, this journey is never ending. I'm so grateful to everybody who tunes in and listens. I hope that you are getting some little gems as you are navigating your own healing journeys. I hope this has been edifying. Shout out to Shanell. Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day. Thank you, Monica, again. Like, I can't express enough my gratitude for you bringing me into this space. And I just hope that I was able to honor your vision for, you know, how this looked. And, you know, I know this is a layered topic that includes a lot of trauma. You could have went a lot of different ways with it. So for you to think of me to come here and speak about this, it meant a lot to me. And it means a lot to me. So thank y'all for listening and allowing me into this space that's so welcoming, and it just feels like, I'm trying to think of the word for it, it feels very like you can come in and feel just very invited in here and like be a part of the conversation, you know.
That makes me happy to hear you say that. I know that there's a lot of podcasts and people could be listening to anybody. I really wanted to create a space where we could be intentional in talking about what healing really looks like. Because I don't think I know when I was on the journey in the early parts, I was looking for this type of content, this type of information. And it was, I had limited places to go with people who looked like me. So I'm grateful to, you know, to me, that's what this journey is. As I heal myself, I can just tell y'all how I did it. And then, you know, hopefully you can take something from my experience and add it to your experience. That's just how I see it. We're all in this together. We are all walking each other home. We are all trying to figure it out. So I'm so thankful that you feel welcomed and feel like this is a place where you can come and show up and be yourself and get some healing. Shout out to all of my listeners. May is an exciting time for the First Mind. We'll have our second episode on the 24th, and we will be talking about, I don't even know how I'm going to title it, but we'll be interviewing a couple who's been married for 17 years and describes their marriage as having gone through a death and then them having to resurrect it. And so most people, I think, get to that place and they just get divorced, but they decided to not get divorced and get the healing and what they needed individually and collectively so that they could resurrect their marriage and keep it on track. So that will be on the 24th. Next month is men's mental health awareness. I have some amazing men that are going to come on the podcast and talk about their journeys with mental health. So I'm excited for that. So stay tuned. Like, subscribe, do whatever you got to do so that you can get the notifications when new episodes come out. And let's heal. I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Bye-bye.